One thing you hope to get out of the call today, or when you watch the replay and revisit the notes, because I really want you to get what you came for. So think about it. And then in the next minute or so, put in the chat one thing you hope to get out of the call today. And you don't have to write a complete sentence, doesn't have to be perfect grammar, none of that shenanigans. Where's my lights? Well, I guess that doesn't work. Oh, there we go. Ah. All right, I got one coming in. I see a lot of y'all, and there's over 100 of y'all registered. So let's get on it. A little more clarity on DRA, assessment, self or client, rebuilding strength and fitness with a tear. Tips to both help myself and others to not have such a tight pelvic floor. All the golden nuggets. That's a good one. All right, let's get a little more coming in and then we will dive in. Y'all, there's lots of information on the slides here. And as always with the free calls, you're going to get the slides. You're going to get the recording, and the recording will be available for 2 weeks. So be sure once you get it, listen to it again, because I know you'll pick up on things the second time, third time around. And print the PDFs, or download them, whatever you do in today's world. I guess printing is kind of old school, and I showed my true colors there. Improve conversation around how to improve core and pelvic floor dysfunction. Yes, great. More about relaxing the pelvic floor. I'm a chronic clincher. Also a bit on helping with incontinence, 21 months postpartum. Oh, okay, but only when snatching. Oh, okay. I know you, Chelsea. Okay. You're probably going really heavy already, or really heavy. I shouldn't say already, 21 months. But we'll play with that. We'll talk about it. Because you're a beautiful Olympic lifter. All right, all right. Let's get started. Let me share my screen. All right, and if you have any questions as we roll through this, put them in the chat box. I will do myself and yourself a favor by not paying attention to the chat box when I am talking, because I can get uber distracted, but I will come right back to it at the end. All right, so let's roll. And if you're just joining us, throw in the chat where you're from, one thing you hope to get out of today, and then use the chat for questions. All right, so I'm Dr. Lindsay Matthews Cantu. I know a lot of you, which is super cool because I kind of know where you're at and what you're going for, but also I don't know a lot of you, and I'm really stoked you're here. Let me just hit next, because I could sit here and just talk with the first slide. This is a free masterclass on core and pelvic floor, and it's actually the first free masterclass I've done on this topic. I've done little tidbits here and there on Instagram and YouTube, but I really hope you like this masterclass puts it all together and gives you some tangibles to walk away with. So what is BIRTHFIT? We are a nervous system focused general strength and conditioning company. We work on general strength and conditioning and rehab, prehab, rehab. And our focus is the motherhood transition, basically preconception, pregnancy, birth, and that first year postpartum. We have 3 offerings, but there's a lot more within those 3 bullet points. Our BIRTHFIT Blueprint membership, which is our monthly membership that we just opened up to all prenatal and postpartum women. And this is amazing. It's $129 a month. You get access to our programs. We have live calls every Tuesday at 10 a.m. And they're all different. So the first call of the month is like a lesson, a discussion that I'm leading, an experience. Second call is always a guest speaker. Third call is mindset and movement. Fourth call is office hours, Q&A, and yesterday was so spicy. It was great. It's so spicy because let me just say this. There are so many women in the membership right now. They're like 34, 35, 38 weeks pregnant, and they're just blowing off steam. All right. So Coach Course is our second offering, and this is open for enrollment right now, early enrollment. And if you go to our website, click the course certifications, Coach Course, you can still get our early enrollment discount. I'm pretty sure it's still available. So get in there. I know I see some awesome coaches and leaders here. So that's really rad. And then you can always do the a la carte program. So prenatal training program, postpartum training program. And there's great support in there. You know, we have a once a month support session for all across the board for all programs. We have a chat section. We're super connected via chat, like our Blueprint membership, connected via text, chat, email, all that good stuff. And then if you look over here, this is me, and this is my baby Vera. And gosh, she's like 3 months there. Oh, time flies, Stephen. All right, next. Like I said, oh, I hit next too soon. Let's see if we can go back. Because I was talking about the objectives. Oh, I'm gonna mess it up. Let me hit that. There we go. Well, y'all, let me hit escape. This is weird. This never happened. X out of here. Stop share. Let's see if we can. I want y'all to see the things. Where's my? There's always a technical difficulty, huh? Objectives. All right, so it'll come back up in just a second. Give technology a moment to catch up. But some of the objectives, like I was saying, I want you to get what you came for. So we're going to talk about what the core is, the BIRTHFIT philosophy, some key muscles, and then we're going to get into the developmental basis of the core, some diaphragm breathing, stability breath, kind of integrating the entire core function together. And then we're going to talk about the top 3 core and pelvic floor dysfunction, which somebody mentioned DRA. That's definitely in there. I say top 3, but top 3 within the motherhood transition. So DRA, prolapse, and urinary incontinence. Oh yeah, y'all mentioned 2 of them. So that's core objectives right there. And then I'll give you some pillars to walk away with. If you're in the coach course, you know these pillars. These are clutch, and they're simple. They're not easy. And then kind of a movement progression to rehab from. And obviously the importance of a collaborative professional team. So here we go. The core, by definition, and just by definition, the core includes all the connective tissue, all the bones, all the muscles, from basically your collarbone down to your pubic bone. If you want to say the right under your chin, you can say that. It is basically that entire cylinder. It is your entire axial skeleton from your neck to your pelvic floor. It is the central pillar of movement, of the kinetic chain, and creates the basis or the framework for all movement to originate from. One of the things, I think it's in the CrossFit world, they say it's like all movement originates from the core to extremity. And that's absolutely correct. So here's some nuggets. Somebody was asking for some nuggets if they want to take these away. The core, right? So it is the central place for movement and power and shock absorption. And this is where force is generated. Like you create force here. It is where it's transferred, maybe from upper body to lower body or out into something like a baseball bat beyond. And where force and power is expressed. Think of dance. Like absolutely that creates or that needs core. strength. It's definitely this axial skeleton connects the upper body, upper limbs, and the lower body. You know, I feel like for myself, whenever I tore my ACL, there was such a disconnect, and the healing definitely involved kind of putting the top half and bottom half back together. We use the core, right, as an energy transfer. It facilitates efficient energy transfer from larger to smaller body parts. Like, think about big tree trunk legs. Like, I love my strong legs, but then also the little baby toes on there. So the core receives, it absorbs, it redistributes, it dissipates power, and this also protects the spine. Like the major thing about, we'll talk about in a minute, about intra-abdominal pressure and being able to manage our own internal pressure system, protects the disc, the spine, and the internal organs, the spinal cord, kind of a lot of critical stuff in the middle. And then, you know, creates a platform, a mechanical advantage, and beyond. All right, more internal pressure management system, what I was just talking about. So this cylinder from the neck down to our pubic bone, I want you to start to think of it like a can of soda, or, you know, Coca-Cola is bad, but can of LaCroix or some other sparkling water, kombucha beverage, I don't know, whatever you like. But it's a pressurized cylinder system that protects really important things on the inside. When there's proper pressure, it prevents injury, prevents energy leakage. And if you've ever had an injury, like some of you mentioned in the chat section, or even myself, there's going to be an energy linkage. So if you're showing signs or symptoms of DRA, of prolapse, of urinary incontinence, those are symptoms of an energy leakage. Our core has to be able to anticipate movement and energy transfer, shock absorbing before that even occurs. It must be able to match the demand of the task at hand. So I put in parentheses, from picking up a pen to picking up a toddler to snatching, as Chelsea was talking about. Our core must be responsive, like must be able to adapt. And this depends on our nervous system for communication. And then we must be able to balance that pressure, harmonize that pressure 360 degrees round. It's not just a belly breath, which is great, you know, if you're breathing in your belly, but you need to be
Lindsay.
Hey.
I'm so sorry.
That's
The
okay.
slides are still on objectives. Is that where
What the
it's
heck?
still supposed to be?
No. Well, no. Okay, let's stop and try again. Oh yeah, I see. See, that's one benefit to paying attention to the chats. Let's try again. Okay. See, there's always a thing with technology. Okay, we're on. Boom. Okay, now let's try share again. Can you see them now?
Yes.
Okay, let's try full screen. If that doesn't work, then uh-oh. Okay, tell me, what do you see? Anatomical definition of the core?
Perfect.
Okay, so this is the slide I just hit. But like I said, it'll be in your notes for sure. So let's keep cruising. Other anatomical definitions of the core, like we just talked about it as a pressure system, and now as a role in stabilization and dynamic movement. So with muscle contraction, there's three different phases, right? There's concentric, eccentric, and isometric. The core Isometrically needs to be able to stabilize during movement to protect the spine and other important organs. It needs to be able to eccentrically contract to prevent injury in some cases, and then concentrically contract to generate force for movement. So that's kind of cool. It needs to be able to resist movement in one plane of motion while facilitating it in another. The best example, well, not the best, but one of the examples that comes to mind is like a baseball swinger, like a hitter, when they're up to bat. It maintains the core, the axial skeleton, the core, that whole cylinder maintains spinal alignment during static and dynamic tasks. So when you're super still or when you're moving. Like I talked about before, it's both an initiator and a brake. Needs to be able to generate force, generate energy, and put the brakes on it, and then be able to adapt to our continuously changing body. All right, so where does BIRTHFIT stand? What the heck? What do we know about the core? Well, we like all that stuff, and we consider the core, like, our goal is to strive for a core that is both stable and dynamic, one that is sturdy and can move. So, you see a bunch of yogis out there and they're quite flexible, quite mobile, but they may not be stable or have strength and be able to like have roots in the ground. Then you look at some other, and you see it more commonly in like bodybuilders where they got beautiful muscles, but maybe not so much mobility. We want both. We want both, and we can absolutely have both. We can have it all in this world. The core, in our view, BIRTHFIT is definitely a system that maintains task-specific intra-abdominal pressure. And the coordination of all the muscles is very key for stability and movement, because they each have a role. And then these things right here, we tend to avoid, or, no, in the BIRTHFIT world. So sucking in, that is not something we recommend. It's usually done for aesthetic reasons. You see it on the bodybuilding stage. Chronic pelvic floor gripping or bearing down. Gripping of the pelvic floor is usually a trauma response, and it's, it could be a micro trauma that's happened over time, but pelvic floor is one of the key places that women hold tension in their bodies. Shallow chest breathing. You see this a lot. Oh, sorry. With people that maybe have had breathing issues in their past, asthma, things like that, or asthma allergies, and or really pronounced, really beautiful six-pack abs. Like they're avoiding breathing into their belly. And so then they just breathe into their chest and even their neck, and they're using their accessory muscles. The inability to relax the core in between exercises, in between contractions, all of it's kind of, got to make sure we're tech friendly here. Not being able to relax is a sign of core and pelvic floor dysfunction. Holding your breath during activities. And I'll make note, like, holding your breath is going to be almost necessary in maximal lifts. Like if you're an Olympic lifter and you're going for your 1 rep max snatch or clean and jerk. But other than that, we need to be able to breathe throughout our daily life. We don't need to be holding the breath when we're doing dishes. And then the military posture, AKA the gymnast posture, AKA the swimmer's posture. And usually that's where, the significant rib flare is there. And our ribs are going to naturally flare in pregnancy to make room for baby. But what I see with this is like there's significant rib flare, and then there's sometimes a tucking of the tail underneath, so tucking of the pelvis. So those are things we like to avoid within the BIRTHFIT world. We do believe that the core has a significant role in strength, hello, and being able to adapt and adaptability. And I would almost add nourishment and feeling safe within ourselves. That's absolutely a must, and being able to transfer load efficiently. All right. All right, so we're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but in your slideshow, I put key muscles of the core. We absolutely have the diaphragm. I'm going to hit on the diaphragm though. I don't know, I might go off on all of them. No, we're going to hit on one or two. Y'all, the diaphragm is the major muscle of respiration and stabilization. And if you look at the picture over here, it's right at the bottom of the rib cage. And it is innervated. So when I say innervated, that means it's powered by the nerves that exit the spine at the level of C3, C4, and C5. In school, we would remember this as C3, C4, C5, keep the diaphragm alive. So hopefully you say that to yourself the rest of the day. But y'all, that is like, if you think about that, that is your neck. Nerves from your neck space innervating and supplying electricity, energy to your diaphragm. This is why it's so important from my chiropractic mindset to get your whole body checked out, scanned, adjusted. When we inhale, the diaphragm contracts, lowers, flattens, and this creates that vacuum inside of the cylinder where that internal pressure system is created. And just on a regular diaphragm breath, everything lowers, and then on the exhale, everything naturally returns back to neutral. So that's super cool. Pelvic floor. So this is what runs parallel to the diaphragm, and the pelvic floor never works in isolation. And I put this at the end, but we are not a company that isolates muscles. We look at the whole picture. And the pelvic floor always works with the diaphragm. So every time you breathe, they're hanging out together. It is innervated by the pudendal nerve, and the S2, S3, S4 nerve roots at the bottom of your spine. Basically the nerves at the bottom of your spine. Let me hit that. So it's going to support what's in your pelvic bowl. It aids in core stability, helps blood flow. There's a role in incontinence, continence, pooping, peeing, sexual function, and stability. So then I won't get into the rest of them, but those two are super important. They're all important, but we have the internal and external obliques, and these are kind of at the upper half of your, like right up here and right here. Like you can turn them different ways. You got internal and external obliques. They're innervated by different parts of your lower thoracic. They help with depressing the ribs, trunk flexion. They're absolutely necessary. Transverse abdominis. This is another key player. And I want to bring your attention to what innervates the TVA. We got lower thoracic nerves and upper lumbar spine nerves. So right at the thoracic lumbar junction, so just below probably bra strap level back there, those are the nerves that are going to innervate the transverse abdominis. The transverse abdominis is that muscle that acts like a corset, is your deepest core muscle, and it runs from your rib cage to your hip bones to your pubic bone. A lot of programs I see get this wrong, and they only look at the TVA like below belly button level. Y'all, it runs like the whole thing, and it is so responsible. This is absolutely responsible for increasing intra-abdominal pressure, compressing, supporting abdominal contents. It is huge in core stabilization. And what researchers like Diane Lee, physiotherapists, are finding out is that when it acts eccentrically, that is actually huge. That's a huge deal. rather than concentrically. So a lot of people think squeeze, suck your belly button to your spine. That's the TVA. But the cue I like better is, okay, on your exhale, can you think about hugging your belly, or baby if they're in there, hugging your belly and trying to maintain that expansion that you created. Because when TVA is working eccentrically, DRA may actually stay wide, but the function has increased and the depth will decrease. And I'll get into DRA in a little bit, but that's clutch. Okay, and obviously the rectus abdominis, those are the six-pack washboard abs. And you know, back in early of my career, people thought, okay, the rectus abdominis, DRA, if we just fix the rectus abdominis, DRA will come back together. But there's been a lot of strides made since then. Also innervated by nerves from the lower thoracic. This is very similar to the internal and external obliques, helps with trunk flexion and depressing the ribs or bringing them down a little bit. But it's the most surface level of the core muscles. All right, and then a lot of people forget that the lumbar spine erectae, so those muscles running along your lumbar spine, I absolutely put these in the core function. There's a group of muscles, and they're called the iliocostalis, longissimus, spinalis. In school, we remembered them as I like spaghetti, but they kind of run, you got your spinal cord, and they run on either side of that. So if one side's active, like side bending, the other side's elongating, or bilateral contraction, if they're both activated, that's going to be the extension. Super important. It's important to know this also because, you know, if you look at a lot of lifters or people in the CrossFit world or a gymnast, absolutely, they might present with that kind of extension compensation pattern where they're just like jamming their lumbar spine together. All right, moving on. So one thing that I found that was absolutely paramount in my understanding of the core was DNS, dynamic neuromuscular stabilization. And this is out of the Prague School of Rehab. And Professor Kolar at the Prague School of Rehab is kind of the pioneer of this. There's others, but Pavel Kolar is, you know, the big name there. And this is based on neurophysiological principles of human development, or developmental kinesiology. So think about how infants develop, and they're basically programming, restoring, learning how to use their diaphragm, learning how to stabilize from infancy to walking. And that's absolutely what DNS uses. They focus on the integrated stabilization system rather than isolating one muscle. And that's, I mentioned this earlier, that's what I wanted, because, you know, I don't know for how long I was just like, the body does not operate as one. Like, you don't just get diabetes in one area. You don't just get inflammation in one area. If you have inflammation, it's absolutely, yeah, if you have an ankle sprain, it's going to be predominantly in that area, but you're going to have inflammation throughout your body for sure. So I really appreciated their take on that. They also DNS prioritizes proper joint alignment and pressure regulation in the rehab and prehab phases, and utilizing mechanics of breathing. And I think there's a quote that Kolar says, might be him or somebody else. It's like, if breathing is not normalized, no other function can be normalized. So developmental kinesiology, this is the study of how movement patterns develop from birth, and it's naturally, like I always say this, like, doesn't matter where the baby is, Texas, Japan, Greece, wherever, if you put them on the floor, lay them on the floor on their back, smile at them, you know, give them some motivation, they're all going to go through these sequential developmental milestones. And they innately develop these optimal movement sequences. When we start to put them in things like the bumbo seats or leave them in their car seats for too long, then they start to develop compensation patterns. But that's super key, is recognizing these sequential developmental milestones, optimal movement sequences. Within this, we observe how reflexive movements become voluntary movements or evolve into voluntary movements. We identify critical development positions, so these milestones, and then developmental kinesiology absolutely shows how early movement patterns set the foundation for later on in life. So here's some big points, and I want to point these out because our BIRTHFIT basics, which are 15 movements and poses, are based on developmental kinesiology. There might be 3 additional ones that, you know, within the 15 that aren't based on developmental kinesiology, but the 12 of the 15 are based on developmental kinesiology because they're absolutely necessary for all humans. So think about this. We go from supine, laying on our back, dead bug, into rolling, go side to side, into a prone position, into a quadruped, so you're now up on tabletop, kneeling, pulling yourself up, into standing. That's very simplified, but that's kind of the progression there. The 3-month prone. So when a baby, you know, starts to do their tummy time, they're on their belly, they're starting to raise up. This is one of the earliest activations of core stability. So they've started to use their diaphragm in that supine position by moving their arms, but now they're using it in a prone position. We get to the 6-month mark, around the 6-month mark, and we got some rotational stability going on. When a baby rolls to the side or comes up to an oblique sit, they're stabilizing, they're learning to stabilize on their same side, their ipsy side. And then when we hit that crawling position, now we're using diagonal chains, diagonal patterns, and we absolutely have to be able to manage our own internal pressure system. So each position trains specific core function, and the milestone before that was absolutely needed to achieve the next milestone, which is kind of cool. This is a little tidbit, a little nugget. Motor patterns versus movement stereotypes. Motor patterns are what's innate. Movement patterns are the compensations. I look at this example right here. I put this in here. My daughter's squat is absolutely beautiful. Then you come to my squat, my adult dysfunctional squat pattern, based on years of ankle taping from soccer, you know, blowing out my ACL, not quite rehabbing optimally. That's right there. That is a movement stereotype. That is a compensations. And I will be working the rest of my life to achieve the squat that my daughter has. So that's just a little tidbit. I mentioned the developmental milestones. Here's basically word for word what we use, you know, within the BIRTHFIT basics, using the dead bug to restore diaphragm breathing. So if you're postpartum, we're absolutely going to start in the sagittal plane. We're absolutely going to start in the most kind of fundamental first level breathing. So supine breathing, legs up, legs supported, whatever feels good. And then move on from there. Quadruped or bird dog for crawling. And then sideline. It's a different stabilization requirement there. And then when you get into kneeling or tripod or kind of anything like that, that will reveal kind of some asymmetries in the pelvis. And kneeling, you can do some pile-off presses, some one-arm stuff. That's going to reveal a ton. And then we use progressive loading from there in different positions and beyond. So you'll see that at the end as well. All right, so let's talk diaphragm breathing. I used to have a ball in here, y'all, and we had a dog. She found a new home, but she chewed that ball up. So diaphragm breathing, you're going to need to use your imagination to follow along with me. This is our natural breathing pattern as humans. This is how we were designed to breathe. And when you're sitting here, you can close your eyes, breathe in through your nose and out through your nose. And just try that a few times and just be an observer of what comes up in your body. I want you to do that all right now, unless you're driving. Start to make note of where you feel your energy. Do you feel your traps creeping up to your ears? Do you feel any energy coming way down into your pelvic bowl? If not, try to send it down there to your groin area, your perineum. And I see some of y'all, I want you to think more horizontal, more expansion, less vertical. So some of y'all are going, I want y'all to go out like hot dog style. Less hamburger, more hot dog. And what might also help, if you put your hands at the bottom of your rib cage and breathe into your hands there. And be sure to breathe into those thumbs in the back. One of the greatest partner exercises is to have a partner. So maybe you're in the gym or you're working with clients. You put your hands on their back with permission at the lower rib cage area and have them breathe into your hands back there. And yeah, you want the wing bones to move a little bit. You want the rib cage to expand. We want to use that whole entire cylinder. So when we're diaphragm breathing in through our nose, out through our nose, and we're using the entire range of motion, expanding 360 degrees, this is efficient, optimal oxygen delivery. It's also nervous system regulation because we're breathing in through our nose and out through our nose. So we're signaling to our nervous system that we are safe. When we start to breathe like this, and this is exaggerating, but if you have a snotty nose and you're definitely going to have more breaths per minute. You're going to signal to your nervous system that you're not quite safe. And that's a whole thing, right? That starts a whole cascade of physiological reactions in your body. This diaphragm breath is the foundation to the entire core, and therefore the foundation to all movement. I would say the best movers in the world, I'm trying to think of the best movers, best athletes, whatever, they spend time breathing. They spend time practicing breathing almost daily, if not every other day. And that could be through meditation. That could be just breath work, like setting a clock and spending 2 minutes diaphragm breathing. But there's some form of breath work, slow down practice on the regularly. Let's move on. This is the stability breath. So this is also known as task-specific intra-abdominal pressure. That was too long. If that title was there, that would be a little bit of a freak out for some of y'all. So we changed it to stability breath, and that's what we call it. This is where all the muscles, right, they got to coordinate together and play the game together. The diaphragm and the pelvic floor are going to be the same on the inhale. Everything naturally lowers and expands. All the muscles are the same. But then on the exhale, they're going to meet that resistance that was created in that internal pressure system. So this is where some of the muscles like the pelvic floor have to absolutely be able to operate in an eccentric phase, in an eccentric contraction. Super key. And if you're working with a postpartum woman or you're immediately postpartum, you're going to find a difference between your task specific intra-abdominal pressure 2 weeks postpartum as compared to 8 weeks postpartum, because you're going to adapt, you're going to evolve, it's going to get better, for lack of words. It's going task specific literally means scalable to whatever task you're doing. It's going to match the demand. And all right, so let's get into some of the core and pelvic floor dysfunctions. Pelvic organ prolapse. Okay, here we go. I was making sure you can still see. So, oh, did I miss something? Oh, well, okay. I don't think that title is correct. Because that is not what's on here. We'll get into the core and pelvic floor dysfunctions in just a little bit. So in the bullet points, you see the integrated spinal stabilizing system and you see IAP. In order to have, just cross out pelvic organ prolapse and put strong and dynamic core. Because in order to have a strong and dynamic core, you need two things. You need the ISSS system, and you can just think all the muscles. You need all the muscles playing the game together, integrated, working in harmony, whatever word you want to use. And then you need task-specific intra-abdominal pressure. So you need two things to happen in order to have a strong and dynamic core. You're not going to have a strong and dynamic core if you cannot manage your internal pressure system. You can do all the isolation muscle activations you want, but you will not have a strong, functional, adaptable core if you cannot manage your own internal pressure system. And that starts with breathing. I put the CNS in here, the nervous system, autonomic nervous system, whatever you want, but that basically regulates, controls, influences the contraction of like how rigid we need to be with our spine and our core, or how fluid we need to be. Lifting a pencil versus a heavy barbell. The nervous system has got to communicate to our core muscles how to adapt. Like I was talking about earlier, it has to be able to anticipate almost like 50 milliseconds before limb movement. Think about the sprinters, the Olympic sprinters. That's wild how fast their nervous system works. Your breathing patterns will automatically change based on the communication from your nervous system when you pick up on when your nervous system picks up on the environment, on whatever load demand is there. It's going to change, become more rigid or more fluid based on the external forces. Super key. Okay, so DRA, I think this is the start of it. DRA, right, is a symptom, a sign. It is not the root cause. It is a sign or symptom, and it is revealed as that separation of the linea alba, which lies in between the rectus abdominis, and is a symptom of the inability to manage internal pressure. In BIRTHFIT, we assess, and I just put some videos up on YouTube, or I think I did a quick and easy, if you want to call it, quick and easy DRA assessment, where you lie supine, knees bent, basically check from your rib cage down to your pubic bone, your xiphoid process down to your pubic bone. And you check it whenever you're laying, resting, no activity, and then with a little sit up. We also check it in BIRTHFIT in different planes of motion. So we might check it in a side plank position. In both of those, or any other position, we're looking at depth and functionality over width. Based on our experience working with women over the last decade plus and latest research, width has nothing, it has very little impact on functionality compared to depth. The priority needs to be on depth of DRA and functionality. Now, this is key because when you're working with a client, or maybe you're on the healing journey yourself, ask your client, ask yourself, what does healing look like to me? And if healing looks like, oh, I want to get back to my 2-finger, 1-finger width with 6-pack abs, and that's your number one priority, BirthFit may not be a good fit for you, because we prioritize functionality over aesthetics. Yes, we love like looking good, and we know we're going to look good when we achieve the functionality we want. We want to be able to lift our baby. We want to be able to run a mile. We want to be able to do squats, push-ups, go on hikes, different things like that. So depth and functionality are going to be huge. There's a podcast I did last year with Diane Lee, and I mentioned her name earlier. If you have not listened to that and you want to geek out about DRA, go listen to that. We could have a whole masterclass on DRA, but depth and functionality reign supreme over width. And what they're finding out is that, I mentioned this earlier, when the TVA is eccentrically contracted, it's actually going to run flush with the connective tissue, with the linea alba, maybe even the rectus abdominis. And the gap the DRA might stay the same, or it might actually widen. However, the functionality and depth will improve, which is, hello, that's all PTs need to know that. All chiropractors need to know that. Whoever is on here needs to know this. The healing pattern I look for when assessing DRA is, are we approximating from top down and bottom up? The umbilicus is going to be the last bit to kind of approximate, heal up. And what I found also is that within that healing, if a mom's still breastfeeding pretty regularly, there's going to be it's going to linger a little bit right around the umbilicus, especially if she's doing everything optimally. The other thing to note with healing, and I didn't even put this bullet point on here, but it's super important, is those that expose their bellies to sun, to daylight, and I've seen this right over the last 12 years, have a lot less issues with DRA than those that never expose their bellies to sunlight. And this is because vitamin D, natural vitamin D, not the supplement, like we get that from, like, our skin has solar receptors on it, and then it's part of making serotonin, which is needed in smooth muscle cells. So kind of amazing. They're all the nature provides everything. We just got to get out of our way. And then I put here the top 5 movements that I love for DRA. Definitely starting with the dead bug, basically supine breathing. You got to start there. Then any kind of side plank option, because that's going to reveal any ipsy side stability issues. And then shin box, I wrote it here as 90-90, but shin box. Shin box, where you start to coordinate your breath, moving your hips a little bit, that's key. Then we get into segmental cat-cow and tabletop. A lot of women that I've seen with lingering DRA, maybe they've come to me, I'm thinking of a woman that was like 3 years postpartum, lingering DRA. Segmental cat-cow, and this is where you do cat-cow segment by segment. It's in our BirthFit basics. It's super important. They kind of move their spine in clumps. And then there's more than likely a history of either being a gymnast or a swimmer, or some injury on shoulder or hip where the deer, like, they have major movement compensation patterns. So tabletop bird dog crawling, activating that cross body sling is huge. So as you can see, they like DRA, you kind of run through the quick and easy of the developmental milestones. And this is because babies are born with DRA and they approximate their DRA by going through the developmental milestones. That's a good nugget. All right, so then we got urinary incontinence, right? So this is the involuntary leakage of urine. Involuntary is key. Sorry, that somebody just blew their horn. During activities that increase intra-abdominal pressure. So somebody mentioned snatching. Absolutely, that's going to increase intra-abdominal pressure. But there's other things like running or jumping, even in Pilates, different, when you go past your threshold and your task specific intra-abdominal pressure has kind of surpassed your level, your threshold, your capacity, that's usually when things like urinary incontinence or prolapse are revealed. They like to categorize this as stress, urged, or mix. And then definitely, I would say the biggest reveal, like the biggest thing I've seen with urinary incontinence is the inability to relax the pelvic floor. And more than likely that's under stress, duress. So my top 5 movements here, are going to be focusing on bringing it all the way back down to the diaphragm breath, which might be like uberly frustrating, but doing pelvic floor relaxation. So that's diaphragm breathing, not thinking about anything else, in a straddle stretch, seated against the wall, or high bear, where your pelvis is above your rib cage. Those two are great. Child's pose is another one. That's another great pelvic floor relaxation. Trying to think if I put any up on Instagram lately. I thought I did, but if not, I'll come back to it. If I did, I'll look for it in a little bit and throw it in the stories. But then once, and this is very similar to prolapse actually. Once you feel like, okay, I've relaxed my pelvic floor, I'm going to throw in here, there should be another bullet point. Any kind of, like if you're seeing a nervous system chiropractor, great, because now you're imprinting the nervous system through an adjustment, which is also like huge. A squat progression. And this is basically to start to challenge the system again, or a deadlift progression, challenge the system again. But I would take at least 2 to 4 weeks of relaxing the pelvic floor, going back down, getting chiropractic adjustments, different things like that to really nurture your nervous system, to remind your nervous system that you're safe. Another thing I'll mention here is Emily Madden's course. She has, I think it's called Hammer of the Goddess, or she does a lot of work with working and touching your yoni, so self-pleasure and connecting with your partner. But I think that's so key for urinary incontinence and prolapse as well. Okay, so we're going to get into, yeah, see, these 2 titles should have been fixed. This should say prolapse. Right, so prolapse is the descent of pelvic organs, basically due to weakness of the supporting functions. There's bladder, cystocele, rectocele, or uterine. Y'all, I've seen women heal from this that got doomsday diagnosis, like surgery's their only option. Are you done having babies? Blah, blah, blah. If you're working with a PT or anybody that says, oh, just stop lifting weights, run. Like that is not what you want to heal, because they obviously don't believe in the capability of the body. They don't believe that the body is self-healing. They don't believe that you can absolutely heal yourself. So one of the biggest things with prolapse is breathing. And Diane Lee talks about this in the podcast a lot, is, for instance, if we're in dead bug, one thing, just regular, we're just hanging out, we're doing dead bug, inhale and moving all throughout the exhale. However, if you have prolapse, you might want to play with moving on the inhale and staying put, pausing on the exhale. So it's a little bit reversed, and it doesn't work for everybody, but it's definitely an option. High bear breathing, supported bridge, those are great ones to help get the pelvis above the rib cage, and just diaphragm breathe in those. The side plank option with the kick through is going to be really nice for prolapse, especially once your nervous system feels supported and loved. And then half kneeling pal off presses to help control breathing and kind of prevent rotation. Those are going to start to reveal your threshold. And then any type of carry progression, farmer's carry, double farmer's carry, front rack carries. I love these because they're baby wearing, hello, because you're starting to challenge the system. Another bullet point I would add here would be tempo squats. So this is one thing I did in the office with clients all the time, is like, okay, can we squat below parallel? Talk to me, pause. What are your symptoms? Like, what do you feel? And we would get to a point to where, okay, we're dumping everything out the bottom. Well, hello. Okay, let's stop there. Let's squat to a target. So those are the biggest things for prolapse. Cross out that title, put prolapse. All right. So I want to hit on this. Gosh, I know I'm running over. These are the 3 pillars that we look at for healing: patterns, nourishment, mindset. And you're going to want to go deep into all these. For instance, DRA hangs out around the solar plexus chakra, which is our identity chakra. So might want to visit that. There's always an emotional, metaphysical component to healing. Ailments don't just happen out of nowhere. Like, they've been brewing over time. The things that happen out of nowhere are usually trauma related, like an ACL injury, you boom, crash, run into somebody, that sort of deal. So assess breathing patterns, movement patterns, nourishment. Are you giving your body the actual building blocks it needs to heal? Like, are you eating animal protein? Are you eating some collagen? All the good stuff. And then mindset, like I just talked about with a PT or a chiro or whoever you're working with, like, they need to believe that the body is self-healing and that you are absolutely capable of healing. Slow is fast. Huge. All right, let's see. Okay, so here, more progression framework. Always start with diaphragm breathing. Always start with diaphragm breathing. Always start with diaphragm breathing. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter who you are. Could be the fittest woman in the world. You need to start with diaphragm breathing. We're always going to go basically supine, sideline, quadruped, kneeling, standing. We're going to go through the developmental milestones. When we're training with planes of motion in mind, we're always going to go sagittal, frontal, transverse. Sagittal, start supine, dead bug, hello, right there. And then load progression, body weight, light resistance, functional loads, then challenging your overall capacity. And then the sky's the limit, right? You're only limited by your creativity. Also, things I love, I mentioned tempo work, single-sided work. So half kneeling, one arm presses, standing one arm presses, seated one arm presses, excuse me, single leg squats, things like that. Those are going to be, they're going to be really revealing, which is not a bad thing. Y'all think of it as an opportunity. What an opportunity to strengthen my left side. Hello. I need that. And then it is absolutely important to have a collaborative team. If you can have a really great pelvic floor PT, a nervous system based chiro, and then you're doing some BIRTHFIT basics at home, you're doing the postpartum training, that's a win-win if you ask me. And then, there's always these one-off amazing healers. Like, I have an amazing abdominal Arvigo massage therapist that I go to. I have a great energy body worker, cranial sacral therapist. Like, tap into those people are wise, very wise. All right. So like I mentioned earlier, we look at the whole system versus isolated training. There's definitely a time and place for isolated training. However, I do not think that needs to be the first step. I will absolutely refer women to one of my favorite pelvic floor PTs, the female athlete doc. I will absolutely refer them to the local PTs here. But if we haven't even addressed the whole system and laid a solid foundation, that's kind of like looking for a quick fix. We're whole system, sustainable, function over aesthetics, function over quick fixes, and then connecting the physical and non-physical. So, whew, hope that made sense. I know I said I was going to leave time for questions, but here we go. Let me tell Leah I'm running late for the coach stuff, but let me get in these questions. Beep, 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 beep. Okay, we're gonna hit these. Is it important to do DRA specific exercises in second or third trimester? Would doing these exercises help lessen DRA, or is it important to work on rebuilding after birth? That's a great question, and I actually don't think we know the answer to that. You know, one thing I tell women about DRA in pregnancy is like it's going to happen 100% of the time by the third trimester. But the degree or the threshold is going to look different. So I definitely had the coning or the dinosaur ridge down my belly when I would do certain things. But y'all, that doesn't mean stop doing it. It's there as like a, hey, I'm here. Are you going to adjust? So I would adjust my breathing patterns, try again, and then reset. Half the time, all I needed was to slow down, reset my breathing patterns. The other half of the time, I just needed to go to the progression of the movement before what I was doing. So for instance, pull-ups, okay, it got really uncomfortable. So let's go to ring rows. Let's go to, bar assisted pull-ups, things like that. Those were the things. I think from my personal experience, I did the BIRTHFIT basics daily throughout my pregnancy. And then I did the line-in program and the BIRTHFIT basics every other day. So it took me through 3 months postpartum. And I'm definitely somebody that lived in the sunshine. I did not have any issues with DRA or pelvic floor dysfunction postpartum. Zero. Healed up nicely. And like I said, the women that I've observed that have been, bellies out, suns out, bellies out, very little issues with DRA. So I think you can do all you can to prevent, but don't drive yourself crazy. Like there's so many other things to drive yourself crazy with, especially in the motherhood transition. Know that the postpartum side is a really opportunity time to reset and recalibrate. Men don't get this time to reset. Like we can reset all compensation movement patterns. It's really cool. As long as we embrace the slow is fast mindset. Okay, so I'll piggyback on that and then I'll get to the other questions. So our postpartum timeline, I actually just posted I made this into a graphic, right? So recovery is our line-in period, and that's about 4 weeks. Rehab is our BIRTHFIT basics. Then we got rebuilding, and that is our postpartum training. And then we get into sport specific. So 4 weeks, 4 to 8 weeks, depending on who you are. I took 8 weeks. Then postpartum training is 12 weeks. And this will take you through 5 months postpartum minimum to get, and then sports specific, you could start, postpartum at 5 months, 6 months, beyond. So that's our general timeline. And I definitely just posted that on Instagram if you want to grab that graphic. But we start with the BIRTHFIT basics, right? In that second month, that rehab, and we start with a smaller volume, like sets of 10, 5 on each side. Then we ramp it up. And the programming, that's gonna be a whole nother thing, but we usually, once we get into postpartum training, it's about 3 days a week, and it includes progressive overload, tempo work, single-sided work. And it just depends on, what we're doing and the movements. But and we sell everything as a postpartum package, but you can also do the a la carte programs. There's a discount for all of our programs at the back of the PDF that you'll get. Okay. Why does DRA linger if you're still breastfeeding? I'm 13 months and definitely, I'm guessing it has to do with the relaxin, because relaxin's still hanging out in our bodies at minimal doses, but it's still there. That's kind of the gist or what I've seen. Other than that, it's a question I don't have the answer to. It might also be, you might want to pay attention to what side DRA, like, is there one side that's, more than the other, or more at top, more in the bottom? And it might be how you're, always holding baby, which is great. Don't put baby down, but, we as women tend to hold babies on our left side, close to our heart, so that we can like be ready with our right hand. But also what I've seen is like, okay, some lingering DRA has a like kind of like, I'll do it up here, like a left side tissue pull, or a left rib flare. So next time you check yourself, just kind of check specifics of it. And definitely send in questions if you want. Awesome. Okay. All right, y'all. I went over. I got to jump on the coach call, but like I said, this is a nutrient dense PDF PowerPoint. Listen to it again. Shoot me any questions. Just reply to the email if you have questions, because I guarantee if you have questions, somebody else does. And I'll try to get on Instagram Live or make a post to clear it up for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I hope y'all have a great week. And if you're at all thinking about the coach course, get on the wait list, because there's still a discount code floating around there. And then, like I said, on the PDF, there's discount codes for our programs. All right, y'all. There's a baby. Bye, baby.